Welcome to the ET Stand, the Cronulla Sharks fans podcast. You idiots, I'm just laughing at these clowns just trying to make faces at me in the background. On this episode of the ET Stand podcast, we are going to work out, stop it you idiots. We're going to try and work out what a dynasty is and if the Cronulla Sharks can ever build one of their own. We're just not content with one premier. These idiots in the background, I'm going to stop them from pulling faces at me. Let's just bring them in. That is Boldo's tears. Chris Kelly, who would you move?
Where do we start? I'm glad Boldo didn't grow up in Egypt times because that's a terrible looking pyramid. It would have fallen over and collapsed by now. And given that he just Googled the squad and put Matt Ikavalu in the bottom and he hasn't been there since half of last year, a pyramid would have fallen.
He's still on the page.
The pyramid would have fallen over. You would have been missing a foundation piece and it's fallen over.
Oh, Maloney is still intercept. Away goes James Maloney. They're kicking him home, the Sharks fans. Maloney is there. Healy. It's Healy has scored on his departure day. Mitch Healy gets a try. The crowd have gone absolutely bereft.
In amongst all of that, Lat's had an awesome story about how awesome this Finau guy was, and then Boldo concludes it with like, yeah, Finucane, how good is he? And everyone's like,
I don't even know who Finau is. I just assumed that Finau was the same guy as Finucane. Is that a different person? I didn't know that. Who the hell's Finau?
Wow.
This is how full the tears are. He doesn't even know half the team.
Boldo.
This is where the tears bit comes into it.
I'm listening to the card going, did my stream just like skip 30 seconds or something? Like, no, it was just Boldo just playing along. But anyway.
Peachy, great ball to Campbell. He's away.
Campbell to the 30-metre line. Now, Colin Best heading for the corner. Gets it back on the inside. Graham, they're over. Nick Graham has scored. 4 minutes into the game. And it's away. Here they are. Pryor. Can he get it there? Yes, he can. Matt Pryor, an unlikely first try scorer for the Sharks.
Interesting enough that the North Bears are getting that desperate. They're talking about having a Pacific Bears team so they can sort of engulf those Pacific nations and sort of get that ball rolling where they think they can sort of, take on the Cook Islands and the Samoans and the Tongas and sort of make it their team. So PNG's to go for me.
I'm pretty convinced after that. All right, Franco, what do you got?
Mate, can I rebuttal that, or am I giving a different answer?
Go for it. Enough arguments on this podcast. Come on.
You're going to throw out cans and they're going to play out of cans.
Ever. That is the dumbest idea ever.
Townsend now calling the shots with Johnson off. They will go. Gallen, field goal. Paul Gallen field goal. That is amazing. That is ridiculous. Away. It's back to Smith. Smith gets it away to Cronk. Cronk's got Korobetti with it. Have they got a chance here? Korobetti's put down. The siren sounds. Cronulla have won it. Cronulla have won it. 14 to 12. You can turn the light out now.
For over 50 years, people have come to see the Sharks play. Talent, skill, speed, intelligence. elite level athleticism. That's not these guys. Biased, one-eyed, opinionated, more often wrong than right. They make up for their complete lack of talent with pure dribble, gibberish, and enthusiasm. This is the ET Stand Podcast.
Welcome to the ET Stand, the Hall of Fame Cronulla Sharks fans podcast that lets its talking do the football. I'm joined by my Hall of Fame worthy panelists, Stephen Franklin and Chris Kelly. G'day, gentlemen. We're live on YouTube on a Tuesday night like we always are, and we're available on audio only, on delay, on Spotify, and all other good audio channels. Do hit the like and subscribe button if you'd like to see more of Franco's hat. Franco, that is a great looking hat there, buddy.
It is. Thank you. I've had this for quite a while. It's had a few drinks spilled on it on many a Christmas party, but the light up feature doesn't work anymore, and it's super hot on a night like tonight. So I don't know if it's going to last the whole episode.
And surviving the rain, Chris. We've had some weird sound in the warm up before this podcast started.
The big southerly change has come through the Wollongong area, but in saying that, being the king of merch, I do have a Sharks Santa hat somewhere. I've got to find it. I don't know where it is, but it's around somewhere.
What have you got? 8 days. Eight days to find it.
I should have busted it out just for tonight.
Yeah, well, that would have been good. All right. Well, look, the Cronulla Sharks have made their announcement about the Hall of Fame, which we'll get into shortly. So that is the subject of tonight's episode. I reckon I've nailed what I think is going to be the 11 that is going to be named based on what information I know from the club, my areas of deduction and just general know-how. And then my dear learned friends have also nominated what they think will be the list. But we're going to quickly touch on Cam McInnes has signed a 1-year extension with the Cronulla Sharks, signing for the 2026 season. I know Franco loves a 1-year deal for these players as they're getting into their older age. Franco, you happy with the 1-year deal for Cam, the captain?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Look, if we're being honest, the 1 year is 2026, right? So we've got 2025 and then 2026. So it's technically he's with us for 2 more years. Works out quite nicely. We renegotiate in 12 months' time if he wants to stay. I know there's been rumours and discussions about the PNG team, obviously the Perth team as well. So there's plenty of opportunity if he wants to sort of cash in at the end of it. But I think with McInnes, the beauty of the 1-year deal is he loves the club. He wants to be here. He's performing really well for us. So, we talk about players taking less to help build a team around the club. It's not always just about money in that scenario as well, right? You can take less in terms of length of contract. So you're not tying up money in future years. It gives the club opportunities to juggle the deck chairs around a little bit better to make sure that they can keep that squad together. So I think he's done well for the club. I think we're doing well for him. And I think, it's one of those relationships where we're not really worried about anyone poaching him, no matter how well he goes. So I think it works well for everyone.
Pleased to have Cam McInnes sign on for another year. Chris, did you watch last week's episode, which was the episode of the Sharks Trivia? Did you catch parts of that one? I saw you in the comments, so I know the answer to that.
Yeah, I was there. Of course I had to. I had to see how our guys represented. It was good fun to see the guys getting along and see how much of a nerd Williams is and how right he was as usual. So
his knowledge was pretty good.
His knowledge is deep, and even a few of the guys were shocked. I felt bad for Dan because Dan's very much like the rest of us mere mortals, where you know the answer, but just it's on the tip of your tongue. You can't get it out, and you know what it is. But the person I feel most sorry for is our administrator there, Franco, who had to keep score with just this absolute rolling mess of a trivia and keeping score. It was like, right, next question, you get 3 points. You missed out.
Oh, changing scores.
It's just changing scores. Here's some bonus points. Like, yeah, math was just out the window. So I don't know how he kept count, but well done.
Thank you,
If
sir.
you missed that episode, do go and watch it with your family of Sharks fans. I did it with a couple of with my brother Andrew Boldo, and he hadn't seen it, and he went through and watched it. He did pretty well. He didn't know the final question. No, the final question is a lot of fun. All right, and lastly, before we get into the episode, let's just welcome Rio Zone to the Cronulla Sharks family in terms of sponsorships. And I just want to tell everyone that I definitely get all of my concrete reinforcing done by Rio Zone, the new back of jersey sponsor. Now, we've got a few comments coming in so far already. So if you would like to suggest who you think should be in the Hall of Fame, do get your comments in. The great Harley has come through, and as predictable, he's saying Paul Gallen should be in there. I have a feeling Paul Gallen might make it into the Hall of Fame. SJD's commenting that the trumpet supporter guy should be in the Hall of Fame. Don't know if we should announce his name on it, but his nickname is Bubbles, isn't it, Chris? We love Bubbles.
Yeah, it sure is. We love Bubbles. We love Bubbles taking us to King Wan for a birthday and getting down a couple of games together. So
we absolutely love Bubbles. And then the lovely and legendary Ash Taylor, who is the Cronulla Sharks historian, is watching live and is very interested to see if I have predicted it correctly. I've done a bit of broadcast journalism trying to work out what I think the answer is. So let's just go through it. The Sharks announced on Wednesday, 11th of December, that 11 of the greatest players to represent the Sharks will be welcomed in the club's newly established Hall of Fame in a ceremony at Shark Stadium on February 18, 2025. The existing 5 Sharks immortals, who are Gavin Miller, Andrew Ettinghausen, Tommy Bishop, as well as Steve Rogers and Greg Pearce, will earn automatic entry alongside 6 other champion Cronulla Sharks players. An esteemed panel led by club historian Ash Taylor. So there he is in the comments. Hopefully I can get it right.
Answer.
Knows the answer. So he knows our. And then we also had Gav Miller, Andrew Ettinghausen, Sharks CEO Dino Mezzatesta and Steve Mace, as well as Buzz Rothfield and Dave Riccio followed. Now, I thought this language was important in the announcement. A strict criteria to decide upon the inaugural. And, geez, rugby league just loves criteria, don't they? Chris, you love
it's a dirty word. We know criteria is a dirty word. We talked about this for Super League coming in and possibly in the future of extra teams criteria. Because right now, we've talked about our home ground. We're not ticking that box in the criteria. So,
all right. Well, so we'll go through the criteria. I think that's a key word that's in this. Sharks members and fans have the opportunity to witness history and pay tribute to Giants of the Game, with ticketing available in the ET stand, which is a grandstand at Shark Park, which is named after the most prominent Cronulla Sharks fans podcast, which is this one. You can also get tickets to the event. There's links on the sharks.com.au website. The event will be hosted by Yvonne Sampson and Andrew Voss. I know Dino, when he spoke to me, and he actually flagged this with me a couple of months ago, was very excited about this one. So it's a great initiative by the Sharks. And it's just great to celebrate some of our all-time great players. So without further ado, let's get into, I've done a bit of a deep dive on the numbers and a whole bunch of things that I think's going on. So we're going to go like that, and we're going to go like that. And I've got a few slides for us to take in terms of the Hall of Fame discussion. So we're on a bit of a journey, as we always are with the likes of me, in terms of Hall of Fame discussion. So let's get into it. So for starters, Sharks have done previous Hall of Fame iterations. So after 25 years, they got together and had a group of 5 judges, including John Raper, Ted Glossop, Arthur Wynne, Ian Heads, and Gary Lester, which named a Super Sharks team of the first 25 years, which was a 15-man team, which included notably Mick Mullane, Ray Corcoran, Rogers and E.T., Chris Gardner, Barry Andrews, Tommy Bishop was the captain, Cliff Watson, Ron Turner, Dane Sorensen, Miller, Ken Madison, Greg Pearce as the vice-captain, Steve Neen, and Rick Burke. So that is the first all-time Sharks Legends team. So a few of those guys are definitely going to feature and may continue to feature. Then we had the idea of the Immortals for the Sharks broached in 2003, and that brilliant painting that was in the old leagues club as you went up towards the King Wan restaurant. And they narrowed it down to a list of, about 20 or so people there, nailed it down to 10, and that's where they then got the 5 Immortals that we have now that are going straight into the Hall of Fame. So at the time, the 10 players depicted in the print were Greg Pearce, Cliff Watson, Steve Rogers, E.T., Mark McGaw, Matt Rogers, Tommy Bishop, Gavin Miller, David Hatch, and David Peachy were considered the 10 top players in 2003. So will those guys hold that spot? We will see. And then Ash Taylor's come through with the comments here. Wouldn't an updated painting be amazing? Gee, someone might know something. All right, cool.
Or wishful thinking.
Ash Taylor in the comments. Wouldn't an updated painting be amazing? Yes, it would. And I have, look, I've already commissioned someone to paint. Get it done. Commissioned my 11, certainly. And then the Sharks named the half team of the century following the premiership year, which I think reeks of recency bias at the time. Now, would you agree with that, Franco?
That's exactly what that is. I mean, if we're being honest, the previous list had a bit of recency bias in it too, with a couple of those players still currently playing in the team. But sure.
Well, in 2003, Peachy was still playing at the time. You're right. Peachy was still playing at the team. So the team of the half century, named by the Sharks in 2017 to mark the club's 50th season, for the panel of Phil Rothfield, Dave Riccio, Gary Lester, and Malcolm Greer, had Peachy at fullback, Matt Rogers and the wing with Valentine Holmes on the other wing with Steve Rogers and ET. James Maloney was the 5'8". Tommy Bishop was the halfback. The front row of Cliff Watson and Dane Sorensen. Michael Ennis is the hooker in that team. Greg Pearce, Gavin Miller, and Paul Gallen is the captain, with Fafita, Kamali, Steve Neen, and Jason Stevens on the bench. Pretty good-looking team. So you'd have to think that the 11 are coming from that team? Maybe. Is anyone outside of that team going to make it? All right. Now, in a previous episode of the ET Stand podcast, we went through the win percentages of the all-time top Sharks. And does winning matches matter? And so then you start looking at around players like, well, Matt Rogers of the notable players has the highest win percentage at 61%. Then you've got a few others floating around like Peachy and Healy and ET. So you're thinking, well, what's your impact on the team? I don't know. The win percentages there. You see one of the ones down at the bottom, Gallen, Gav Miller, and Greg Pearce, don't exactly have win percentages that hit it out of the park. Chris, do you think the win percentages and the success that players necessarily had with the Sharks matters?
Not so much. You could have been in a red-hot team and have an absolutely great winning percentage. I know Franco's last place guy is his favourite down there in Monty Porter, so high percentage at 14%. But yeah, if you look at Rogers and Peachy, they were playing some red-hot teams. There were a couple of down years, but not many for Matt Rogers in that era of 95 to 2001. He's always going to be at the top. So it counts if you were a mainstayer, but as you know, like Gallen's down there at 50%, but he had some real dry years when he was at the club all that time. So, yeah.
It's tough if you play with the club. But for 17 years, it's a little bit tricky to go on. Franco, do you want to make comment on your previously questioned Monty Porter, who has a grandstand named after him?
Look, it's not quite as fun without Matty Williams here, but I will iterate that I don't think the grandstand should be named after him, and we'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. All right, we've had a few comments come through. SJD is asking Ash to wink if Preston made it into the group. And then I'm going to leave your comment, Chris, for a little bit longer because that is going to be relevant in a second. All right, so then I went and pulled the list of the all-time Sharks just ranked by appearances based on Rugby League Project. So if you take the top 10, or 11 rather, just on total appearances for the Sharks, and you named them as your immortals, or your Hall of Fame, you would have Eddinghausen, Gallen, Dane Sorensen, Wade Graham, Greg Pearce, David Peachy, Steve Rogers. Mitch Healy is the 8th all-time cap Shark. Danny Lee, Andrew Fafita, and David Hatch would be your top 11. Gavin Miller sitting at number 12. Franco, looking at the all-time appearances list, does this sway you in any way for one player over another?
Well, not to cast shade. However, I do believe that Paul Gallen surpassed ET in appearances there. So there might be some corrections to the list somewhere there and throughout. But generally, I think we see the trend of some heavy hitters, right?
Yes, I think Rugby League Project counts total matches for the Sharks. And so if they have midweek tournaments and all that sort of other stuff, it then counts the numbers. So that's why it lists ET as having played more games for the Sharks, which I thought was interesting because, Paul Gallen is first grade matches for the Sharks is 349 as that number there, whereas ET's got 362. So he has the midweek matches and all those other ones in there. Gotcha. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll take that. Sounds good.
Sorry, Paul Gallen, you're not the most capped shark. It's Andrew Ettinghausen. Why don't we ask, hey, Ash, can you answer that for us right now? He's one of those other matches that ET's played, according to Rugby League Project, that has him listed as having more matches than Paul Gallen. If Ash can clear that one up for us, that will be particularly helpful.
Any nines or sevens in there that he did?
Well, tough to say. So what do you make of Mitch Healy and Danny Lee, Franco?
I mean, Mitch Healy was sort of a great competitor, a good player, stuck around maybe a little bit too long. But he was never one of my favorites. He didn't really gel with me. Obviously, Paul Green was there that I really preferred to watch. I thought was a bit more energetic, a lot more fun to watch. But Mitch Healy was a solid player. Obviously, we had a lot of good wins with his leadership. So steering us around the park. So I would say, yeah, he's certainly one that people might talk about as a player who did a lot for the club. But he probably, that dirty word of criteria, he probably misses out just based on a few of those line items that the Sharks have put forward, unfortunately. So he's probably not right in the discussion, but from a fan's point of view, I reckon there's a few people who are out there that have him as a favourite.
All right. Well, speaking of criteria, your dear friend Boldo then came up with his own criteria, awesome thinking, that shaded my kind of discussion points. So point one was, let's not get caught up in the recency bias. So I think the premiership team might have influenced that team of the century a little bit too much. And so I'd question that of, well, how recently did a player have to have retired? And is Wade Graham, Paul Gallen, etc. eligible? Because you just do tend to have that. It's difficult to just know how good and powerful Cliff Watson was, for example. Point number two is players from the same position. So just because you have the team of the half century, you only have one halfback in the starting team, doesn't mean you can't have three halfbacks or something, because the halfbacks are typically the champion players. The next point I thought of was taking association and ownership. So are there any players in the Sharks' history that the Sharks wish that they owned more of them than they did? Luke Lewis, is he a Panthers player, Chris Kelly, or is he a Sharks player?
We'll find out, mate. We'll find out.
But what do you think? What is the actual answer? Do you consider him, do rugby league fans think of Luke Lewis as a Shark or a Panther?
Do I say where I've put him, or if I think he's...
Well, no, I just answered the question of whether he's a Shark or a Panther.
Given what happened in his career and the award that he won on the night of the 2016 Grand Final, he's out.
Fair enough. But this guy's not a Shark. So a couple are going to get booted off. Maloney, he's not coming in. And then lastly, I did think about the criteria and also who might be eligible later. So interestingly, if you apply the criteria to Nico Hines and he was to retire tomorrow, Nico Hines has a great case for being in the Sharks Hall of Fame because he's ticked every box, including winning the Player of the Year in Daily M and internationals and all that sort of fun stuff. So that being that criteria. And then lastly, this is the criteria that was in the email in the notice from the Sharks. So to be considered for the Hall of Fame, the player must have met 4 of the following 5 criteria. So demonstrated exceptional performance on and off the field. So sorry, Ben Pomeroy. Chris?
I was just going to say,
Pomeroy.
Zach was just asking before about your love and our association with Pomeroy, and he was number 23 on that list of most capped Sharks. So
he is number 23. Well, there's a reason why we loved the Palmers, because he was number 23 on the list. I've got the full list of players in a second. Okay. So that's point number 1. Like Chris said, greatest Shark to grace Toyota Park. Don't know about that. And SJD correctly points out that Preston doesn't qualify for the criteria. Boo. So point 2, to be eligible, you need to have been an international, including World Cup matches. But then you also have to have played State of Origin. So if you are not Australian, it makes it a little bit tough for you because you've got to hit all the other 4. You need to have played 100 first-grade games for the Sharks or won a premiership, which means you're still in the running, Michael Ennis. And then lastly, you need to have received a Daily M medal, NRL recognised award, or been the Porter Gallen medal for the Sharks Player of the Year award. Now, the Sharks Player of the Year award prior to, I think it's 1989, is a little bit different to understand and decipher. So there's no list of those. It's a little bit tough to work out who those were. So that is the existing criteria. Now, Ash Taylor's come through in the comments and answered from our last slide a few ago that said how many, and I'll just go pull that up. Where is it? There you are. It looks like Rugby League Project have counted Tui's Challenge, Lotto Challenges, and the Amco Cup. So that looks like that's why.
We count the Amco Cup.
Oh, we definitely count the Amco Cup. All right, let's hide that one. All right, now I'm going to attempt to change screens now. I have a treat for you guys. I have spent a little bit of time today with a spreadsheet of every Sharks player ever, and then I have applied the criteria to all of them. And I'm going to share that spreadsheet on my screen right now. So I'm going to remove that bad boy. I'm going to add that one. Can you guys see that?
It's very small.
I'm sure it is going to be very small. So I'm going to go
Maybe
like that.
maybe for the YouTube viewers, they're able to have their lovely video on full screen. I very much apologize to our audio listeners.
Well, we'll go through the audio. We'll go through it in a second. So I'm going to talk to this screen and we're going to slowly eliminate them. So of the players that were considered elite performers, there was 81 players that were elite performers. So I've gone and I've listed every single Sharks player, and in green are the ones who are definitely making it, being Tommy Bishop, E.T., Greg Pearce, Steve Rogers, and Gavin Miller. So if I go and unhide the, anyone who doesn't hit the 4 or 5, that eliminates a whole bunch of them. So that leaves us with, what have we got? That leaves us with, if I count that number, it leaves us with 25 players who actually fit the criteria. So the 25 players who are eligible for the Hall of Fame include E.T., Paul Gallen, Dane Sorensen, Wade Graham, Greg Pearce, Peachy, Steve Rogers, Danny Lee, Andrew Fafita, Gav Miller, Jason Stevens, Mark McGaw, Dan Staines, Brett Kamali, Matt Rogers, Chris McKenna, Ron Turner, who was the hooker in the 73 grand final, Luke Lewis, Ronaldo Mulatalo, Steve Neen, Greg Bird, Valentine Holmes, Tommy Bishop, Nico Hines, and James Maloney. How does that sound as a list, fellas?
It's pretty good.
Now, then I've also got, let's just check here what else I've got. Then I also did, all right, well, if you're in the half team of the century and I booted you out, then I also booted out players that were retired for not longer than 5 years. So that's a key part of the criteria. So that means that Andrew Fafita and Wade Graham are not eligible. So once I do that, that then gets me down to 14 players. So I'm left with E.T., Gallen, Sorensen, Pearce, Peachy, Rogers, Miller, Stevens, Dan Staines, Kamali, Rogers, Steve Neen, Tommy Bishop, and James Maloney are the players that I'm choosing from. That's where I got it down to, based on the criteria and were you in the team of the half century? Because I think you've got to be in the team of half century, don't you? But maybe not. All right, so let's remove that screen, and then I'll take you back to my mob. All right, so this is where I landed, fellas. So we obviously have the top 5 of Tommy Bishop, Greg Pearce, Steve Rogers, Gavin Miller, and Andrew Ettinghausen. So they're obviously going to be in it. So the first player I had listed, I'm putting in Paul Gallen. Obviously, he's the most capped first-grade Sharks player. I've then got...
On a technicality.
On a technicality. On a technicality. That's right, Andrew Ettinghausen. You are the most capped Shark player.
You're still the most capped.
And then I'm throwing in Dane Sorensen because Dane Sorensen is the third most capped Sharks player. Came back to us champion player in those times in 2 eras of greatness in terms of 78 and 79, and then also in the later years in the late 80s. So I think Dane Sorensen has to make the team or the list of immortals. Then you got to have the peach. So I got the peach. Then in spot 9, I'm putting in Matt Rogers. So I think Matt Rogers makes the team of Sharks all-time Hall of Famers based on how many points he scored for the Sharks. Not just because he's Steve's son, but he was an absolute champion player. And of the champion players, he has the highest win percentage and performed at the elite level. Then I have Luke Lewis is making my list of 11. So Luke Lewis being the Clive Churchill medal winner elite performer. Also, just how he performed at State of Origin in Australian teams, and just what he did for some of those teams. And he is the Clive Churchill Medal winner from our most important game ever, winning that man of the match. And then lastly, I have champion player Brett Kimmorley makes my Hall of Fame of 11. And I believe Kimmorley, from the years 2002 to 2008, was our key player, playing a whole bunch of seasons for the Sharks. He was the captain for a while. He held Andrew Johns out of the Australian team. That's how good Brett Kimmorley was. He is an absolute champion Sharks player. And that is my list of 11 players that Boldo thinks the Sharks will name for the Hall of Fame. Franco, can I get a reaction from you on that Hall of Fame?
I think it's a good listing. I very much subscribed to one of your criteria of avoiding recency bias. I'm not entirely sure that 5 years is long enough. I might be on my own in that one. So a player like Paul Gallen, although I'm sure he will be there on that list, Luke Lewis is certainly a red hot chance. I like the idea of keeping them out for longer. It gives an opportunity for a few more of the legacy players to get recognised, of course, assuming they deserve it. But also, and this is taking a leaf from the NRL Hall of Fame as a whole, although they don't, I think they're trying to kill that rule. The idea of having a time needing to go under the water, or go under the bridge before being nominated or accepted into prestigious groups such as this, is it shows what you do for the club after your retirement, right? It gives you an opportunity to give back to the club. Now, it's not in the criteria, it's not a requirement, but it certainly gives something else to sort of show how much the club meant to you, right? It's now no longer your job. It's now no longer something that you have to say, I love the Sharks. You don't have to turn up on a daily basis, put in the hard yards at training, but you still want to show your appreciation for the club. You still cheer for them when they win. If you heard in the media, you're still commenting favorably about the club. You're not bad-mouthing the club. You may be helping out with juniors or junior football around the place. You might be part of the coaching setup or administration, sharing the knowledge that you've gained through your illustrious career. I think those sorts of things are very important to the culture of the club and what this Hall of Fame list should really allude to. Having someone who flies in, wins us a premiership, and then flies out again, while we are all very grateful for winning a premiership, might not be the right forum for them.
I think that's a fair comment. Chris Kelly, I'm going to ask you about Mr. Inside Ball. Brett Kimmorley, do you think he deserves a spot? Where does he sit in terms of your eyes of all-time great Sharks players?
In terms for me, like obviously you had one of those games where we talked about the Manly game where he had a whole lot of points and things like that. But to me, that whole era was tainted around the Chris Anderson, the Preston Campbell, who's going to play first, who's not going to play first, who's going to come off the bench, who's going to get replaced. It was the intercept, and you held out Andrew Johns, but he also got replaced by Andrew Johns instead of after the intercept game to Matt Bowen, and a guy who played for many clubs. So it's kind of that same criteria as we talked to, like Franco saying, the fly out. Yeah, is he a Shark? Like he won a premiership to Storm before he come to Cronulla. He then went on the Bulldogs. He played for the Hunter Mariners and Newcastle as a junior. So it's kind of hard to sort of say yes, because it was just that era. We weren't fantastic. Yeah, by the back end, we were starting to make some consistent finals, but it was a bad marriage at the time for a lot of Sharks fans because we had such a gun young fella ready to go who won the Daily M, and too bad we got Brett Kimmorley here. So for me,
that was all Matt Johns' fault, Chris.
I know,
should have played Kimmorley with Preston.
It's just it's the Jared Anderson, Chris Anderson sort of era, so it's kind of hard to put Kimmorley in there. Not saying Franco just spoke on it, Hall of Fames and things like that. We've had teams of the centuries and teams of the anniversaries and things like that. Hall of Fames and other sports, like Franco just spoke on, like baseball, NBA, NFL, all those kind of things. Like Franco said as well, with rugby league pushing, obviously the Melbourne Storm trio trying to get into the Immortals so early, and Darren Lockyer, you need that sort of time off and a time away from the game to sort of let the dust settle and don't get the recency bias. So there's usually criteria for those kind of guys. It's usually about a 10-year in the States. It's quite a while for guys to get Hall of Fame. So if that's sort of regarded, and like you said, not that we're going to knock those top 5 out of any list, but, they were always going to be in there, but they obviously fit the straight in criteria. So things. So, it's kind of.
Tommy Bishop doesn't actually have the 100 games.
Yeah, but it was such an.
Nor has he played State of Origin.
Yeah, but he played for England, so it was one of those guys coming over and turning the club around pretty quickly.
Well, that's
Yeah.
absolutely true. He obviously has to be there. SJD in the comments has come through saying Gallen, Rogers, Peachy, and Sorensen are the very 4 obvious ones, which I think is true. And SJD said, I'd love to see Jason Stevens get it. So, SJD, I spent hours thinking about whether it was Jason Stevens or Luke Lewis. Jason Stevens was my next one, and Steve Neen was after that.
Oh, I'm excited to do honourable mentions. That's great. I'm glad I wrote them down.
Yep. Well, you can talk to them in a second. All right. So the great Matthew Williams, who's a regular on this podcast, listed the same 11 as Chris Kelly. So, and 10 of those were the same as mine. But the 11th player that he mentioned and that Chris mentioned, Chris includes Andrew Fafita. So, Chris, tell us why you think Andrew Fafita should be in that group instead of Brett Kamali.
Oh, he kind of knocked out the first criteria of maybe off the field, but I think a lot of players would, but he ticks the box and everything else. We've spoke about it. It's in our intro. It's probably one of the greatest moments we can ever remember is dragging 4 Storm players over that try line and scoring the try to put us in the lead to win the premiership. So that's why he goes on there. He was an absolutely gun ripper player at the time when he was in his absolute form for State of Origin Australia. He's now represented Tonga as well and had a big hand in getting Tonga up and running. And the popularity they've got at the moment of players switching allegiances. Should have been the Clive Churchill medalist. So if we went back over the list and he had the Clive Churchill medal around his neck, I'd probably knock Luke Lewis out of my list and probably replace him with my 12th man that I had lined up that we can do in the honourable mentions. But that's the reason why. Fafita was just, it was a rip and tear, and that grand final performance is something I just never forget.
Oh,
and again, like Franco said, players, past, he's still involved in the coaching crew at the moment. He's still on the sidelines there helping out the club and helping out the young fellas. So still involved in Bush Rugby League. So he's still there.
Now, given that I think Fafita may not be eligible because of the 5-year rule, Chris.
Yep.
If you take Fafita out, who would you, because of that rule, who would you include?
Well, my 12th man was Preston Campbell because he won the Daily M. But being that criteria, I'd have to put Wade Graham there now. He'd be my next man
he's
up.
not going to be eligible either because he's not within 5 years.
He's not going to be eligible either. So he's my next man up. So
who's your next man up after that?
It'd have to be, where are we going to go after that?
Are you going to go Kamali, or are you going to agree with me, or are you going to go?
No, we're not going to go Kamali.
You would never go Kamali.
I would never go in there. Oh, can we put Ben Pomeroy in there? Surely.
Well, you can't put Ben Pomeroy in there.
Surely he gets
Ben Pomeroy. When we do the Sharks ET stand Hall of Fame, I think Ben Pomeroy will certainly be up there with Gerard Beale
as a fan favourite. It's hard to find some other players to put in there over those guys. It's probably a Chris McKenna or a Mark McCaw is probably next after that. So, and then my favourite was Jonathan Docking, but it's just making those criteria, isn't it?
Yeah. So John O'Docking, he has the State of Origin, but not international. And he didn't seem to win a Sharks Player of the Year or Daily M, Jonathan Docking.
Yeah.
Which knocks him out of the 4.
Surprising.
Go look it up, Franco. I know that might be a spoiler alert for who Franco's going to include in him. All right, well, do get your comments in. So if you think we've got it wrong or who you think should be in there, do certainly let us know. Ash Taylor's reminded us that Andrew Fafita is, of course, the scorer of the greatest Sharks try of all time.
I don't even have to close my eyes. I can picture that moment. It's just there.
It's so good
in my memory. It's just.
I just also like that try, Paul Gallen being grumpy because Ennis didn't pass the ball to Gallen because in the pressure spot, Gallen wanted to get the ball. So
It was still a set play. It was called, ready to go. Gallen had his highlight with Ben Barber. That was there.
That he did indeed. All right, Franco, have you worked out the answer to that question yet?
I am working on it.
Jonathan Docking. Someone get in the comments. Did Jonathan Docking win a Player of the Year award with the Sharks? Or did Jonathan Docking play international football? And I don't think he did. And I think that knocks him out.
He did not play international
football. So
Well,
that
there you
knocks
go.
him out.
Unless we're talking about the Australian President's team.
I also bought SJD and put Jason Stevens in if I've got to get him out.
Oh, Jason Stevens is a great shout.
He's one of my favourites off the field as well.
Jason Stevens is a great shout.
Still around the Shire.
Tell you what, he'd be so pleased, Jason Stevens, if he was named in this.
Oh, and he ticks all those boxes, all that criteria. He's there.
Ticks all those. All right, Franco.
Gentleman.
Absolute gentleman. Well, let's go through Franco's list. So, as we know, Franco is the greatest judge of junior players of all of the ET Stand Sharks podcast.
Hang on, did you give him the criteria first?
No, it's just who Franco thinks it should be. So,
gotcha.
I'd rather get. There's no point at all.
Stapo, Borcha.
Yeah. Ben Borcha,
Scotty
Luke
Porter.
Metcalf.
Scotty Porter.
Luke Metcalf. Maybe we should each have just done our all-time.
Blake Fergo.
Yeah, we can do an ET Stand Hall of Fame.
ET Stand Hall of Fame. Stapo. All right. So Franco has gone through and done a list of who he thinks should be the Hall of Fame, not necessarily who they will be. So let's go through that. So obviously Franco sticks with the 5. Immortals that were named. Franco, there was never any doubt that those 5 should be included, I guess.
They're not kicking them out. I think they said they're going to be in the announcement.
They are, but was there any reason to kick them out?
No, you can't. Can't do it.
No,
you're in.
All right. So Franco's first pick. Franco does not pick Paul Gallen. So why aren't you picking? You want to double down on this, Franco? We kind of said it already.
I told you. Paul Gallen will get there. He will get there. He will be a Hall of Famer.
Hater, aren't you?
He will be an immortal. He will get there. He doesn't have to get there this year. Okay? He will get there. Just give it some time. It'll build and everyone will be like, oh, Paul Gallen. But look, we know he's going to be named. I will be deeply, deeply shocked if he's not named. But I just feel as though it's something that just needs time to pass. Just let it build, let the myth grow, and the legend, and it's just going to be awesome to see when it does happen. And you know what? Let's just build him as a tentpole. Is he going to get nominated this time around? I don't know. We all know he's going to get eventually.
He's your favourite brick mural that was in Cronulla. It's now at the Shark Park now, the famous mural. He's probably the first.
No one got me a brick.
There is no way Paul Gallen is not making the first ever Shark Hall of Fame.
Yeah, deserves a statue out the front of the stadium. He's probably the first guy you nominate to do that. But Boldo, can I ask, do you reckon it'd be filthy if you're in one of those, team of the early celebrations, your team of the century, your team of the 50 years, and you don't make the Hall of Fame? Like, you've been selected in those categories before.
Well, I think Rick Burke cops a tough time. He was like an absolute legend player, Rick Burke. And then I reckon Cliff Watson's pretty unlucky too, actually, not to make it. He didn't hit the criteria, but he should have also, I think, floated around. And Steve Neen's also. There's just so many good players. Paul's come through and said, Ken Madison could also be a good one. What about Sifa Talakai at centre, Paul?
It's Christmas time.
Don't poke the bear.
All right, Franco's gone with Dane Sorensen. Next up, Franco's got the Peach. Yeah, which just seems an obvious selection of the Peach. And then Franco's also got Matt Rogers. So those 3 seem pretty consistent. And then after that, for Franco, we've then got, Franco goes Brett Kamali. So talk to us about that, Franco.
I agree with CK completely in that he is definitely maligned and associated with that Anderson era. However, I think that stains how good a player he was and how much he put in for the club. He went to the Bulldogs at the end of his career there, but that was falling out with Ricky Stewart. I think he would have happily stayed on at the Sharks till the end of his career. He certainly tried his best. Whether or not that was good enough for some fans or not, who's to say? Obviously didn't win us a premiership, but that was not for lack of trying. I think he's also a bit of a media favourite. You've seen that he's been listed in all of the previous, or that he's been around for anyway, the previous lists and nominations. So I think he'll be in there at some spot. But yeah, I think if you take away,
he also sacrificed a body part for the Sharks.
He
did.
did.
Remember that.
He did.
He also
That
was the
his
top
ultimate-
point scorer in a season and is the highest point scorer in a match.
He did a lot. He did a lot for the club, and after he stuck around, he continued even during his commentary time praising the club. He helped with coaching. He was going to be the inaugural NRLW coach before we were rejected. So not receiving that team where he was then.
Franco's still angry about the Sharks not being one of the first.
So am I. So am I.
Not as angry as Franco was.
No.
Franco was so pissed off about that at the time.
Absolutely should have been us, but anyway, let's not.
Anyway, all right. So Kamali's in on the Franco list. All right. So next up, then Franco has Kurt Sorensen.
Yeah. So this is Gray. This is he's really there because for me the Sorensens came as a bit of a package. Dane and Kurt together, just steamrolling and wrecking people, and so that's why he gets the nod. There, I'll get to my honourable mentions. There are some you could certainly substitute in and out, but there's just that bit of nostalgia for me where the two of them together, ripping and tearing, and my old man cheering them on. That's sort of where that one comes from me. Probably doesn't pip a few other players that you've mentioned and that I'm about to mention in my honourable mentions, but in talking earlier about, Paul Gallen or Luke Lewis getting in and that recency bias, he's certainly one of those players that I feel that if he doesn't get a chance now, he's probably never going to get a chance. That's not to say he deserves a chance, but I'd like to see him in there.
It's a good pitch. Get him in there. And then next up, Franco's last pick, which, geez, he's a good player too. This player, he was popular amongst Sharks fans of my era that grew up in the 80s, loved Jonathan Docking. Franco, why should Jonathan Docking make the Hall of Fame for the Sharks?
Just another local junior who came in, did a wonderful job at fullback, lit up the competition. It was really, really lightning quick, nimble, bit of a ball player as well from fullback. So you see CK there nodding. I think he agrees. I think he would like to see him in there too. And now that I know that Vossi's going to be at the event, Vossi loves Docking. Surely he's in, right?
Vossi's not on the criteria.
No, but he might fudge something there.
Maybe.
Do you know what it was, Franco? Like everyone's favourite Chicago Bull player was Michael Jordan, but how can you not like Horace Grant over, your token player instead of just picking the popular guy? So everyone was an ET fan, and I was as well. But my first jersey, I made sure I got number 1 put on the back of it when I was just a kid because I just loved Docking. Like it was the cool helmet, like you said, the suave at the back. It was just one of the first kind of players that was like that sort of type of player. So yeah, Docking. The shark on the side of the helmet, please.
It's basically Macho Man instead of Hulk Hogan is what you're presenting there, Chris Kelly.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Let's also not forget Jonathan Dock made Andrew Eddinghausen be a centre.
Yes.
And so if we ever interview ET, I'm going to ask him about becoming a fullback and centre instead of a fullback because ET was such a good fullback. And then you'd thought, Docking gets out of there and ET will start playing fullback. And then the Peach came along. So... But anyway, all right. Ash Taylor's come through in the comments advising us that Cliff Watson only played 38 games for the Sharks.
Yeah.
But and then so Evan Burns coming in late is just taunting you, saying, "Where is Gal Franco?" So, Evan, if you rewind, you'll hear Franco talking all about recency bias and not putting in Gallen yet and putting him in at the second dinner and having him as the keynote speaker. All right, honourable mentions, gentlemen. Franco, anyone you would like to include?
I've got heaps. Some are honourable mentions. Some are honourable mentions because they just can't be included.
All right.
But I would like to have seen them there. That's Paul Green, Steve Neen, John Lang, a coach. I think, he obviously we've all got a soft spot
do
for
the
him.
coaches next time, Franco.
Well, but they're not. If you go by the criteria of Hall of Fame, a coach can never be nominated unless they previously played for the club. So
John Morris.
John Morris could potentially be the. So yeah, I don't know if there should at some stage be a concession to coaches, and obviously it will likely be Flanagan, but John Lang, I believe he really sort of got that club going. They were an excitement machine. He turned them around. Really, I know a lot of people talk about the identity of the Sharks being that tough, gritty, drag them down team, a la post Ricky Stewart. However, for me, the Sharks were always a fast, flary, great team that would score heaps of points and do it with style. And that was the identity of the Sharks for me. That's what that's what John Lang brought in, with the likes of a whole slew of favourite players of ours like E.T. and Rogers, Peach. My others honourable mentions are Jason Stephens, who's been mentioned, Mark McGaw.
Paul's come through in the comments calling out Mark McGaw. If you're considering docking, Mark McGaw played 14 Origins and 4 Tests.
Yep.
And I was heartbroken when Mark McGaw left the Sharks.
Mm-hmm. So he's certainly an honourable mention for me. Another one is Paul Green. Sort of mentioned him in glancing earlier. And finally, while you, I think, are against it, and while I don't think he should be nominated this time specifically due to recency bias, Michael Ennis.
The silence is deafening.
Michael Ennis played 2 seasons.
Yeah. I believe that 2 of those criteria are there just for our premiership winners to be able to be nominated.
So that Michael Ennis can be added later.
Correct. Yeah.
Maybe not this time, though.
Not this time.
All right,
correct.
Christopher, have you got any additional ads?
Yeah, mine was Docking, Stevens, Wade Graham, and then obviously Preston. You talked about the flary sort of type. That was with Preston, wins the Daily M over Andrew Johns, might I add as well. Was it part of that John Lang era and much that maligned to the Brett Kamala era. And he now has the Indigenous game medal named after him for the Preston Campbell medal. So it's a pretty high honour. It'd be pretty cool to have him in the Hall of Fame for us and any other club that he played for. I'd rather have him in first for us. I'm sure he'd be chuffed with it.
He is still considered a Shark, Preston Campbell, just for that one special season. He still gets associated with us, Franco. It was a brilliant season.
But I think, does he associate himself as a Shark? I don't know.
Yeah, but you could argue that he was a Daily M Player of the Year for the Sharks. So does that make him better? Won a premiership
with Panthers, played more games with the Titans, and they set up the All-Stars in his name. Michael Searle, the CEO of the Titans, in honour of him. So he's got a lot of association with those other clubs as well.
Yeah, buggy of Preston, you've had enough stuff. Other ones I like, which we haven't mentioned, of course, the great David Hatch, who was the captain of the Sharks for a lot of the 1980s and captain of that 88 and 89 team. He was a terrific player and just really represented that toughness of the Sharks, as did Danny Lee, who's unheralded. And then my personal favourite that I think is worthy of, no, it's not Ben Pomeroy. I love Adam Dykes as well. I'd love to get Adam Dykes.
I was about to say that.
All right, Adam Dykes is what is he? 13th on the all-time list of total matches for the Sharks.
Probably your favourite.
And he was heartbroken when he left the Sharks. Hey?
Probably your favourite game day chant of all time.
Well, it is. I think he might be one of my all-time favourite Sharks.
Yeah.
And then the other one that's a shame is that Adam Ritson is not eligible, and he had in the years that he had with the Sharks, he was a terrific player as well. So what it does just prove is just how much fun it is talking about the champion players of the Cronulla Sharks. So I can't imagine poor Ash Taylor and that committee of legends trying to work out who should be in there and convincing Buzz Rothfield, but otherwise. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. So yeah, if you think we missed anyone and you want to list your list of Sharks Hall of Famers that you think should be the list, do get it in there. We're working with the club to try and get a live ET Stand podcast from the event, which would be pretty cool. Or even going. Maybe we should buy a table, Franco. You're a big wig these days.
I mean, maybe.
Table of 10,
we'll see.
done.
I don't know if I'll be inviting you, Boldo. We'll invite Paul and we'll talk about Talakai and positional play.
Well, Paul's saying that we should get Barry Russell in there too. Barry Russell won a Daly M.
Yep.
And if not for for the dislocated shoulder, we would have won in '88. Not a bad shout. Paul, heartbreaking that one. Geez, there's so many good players for the Sharkies, isn't there? All right. Anything else from you, lads? As this will be our last episode of the year. Franco?
Chris.
No, go, Chris.
I was going to say, I'd be interested to know the ones that just missed out in discussions around that. I'm sure we can speak to Ash down the track and how that sort of went and came about, the players that were close to making it. And, you know, you obviously got that top 5 and you got another 6. And, you know, imagine us trying to do it and say, no, he's got to go. You have to try to agree to that. So, yeah, I'd like to know what
I think that's why
there.
they work on the criteria.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it can just be too subjective. And here you
I'm
go.
sure
Paul's
there's a
saying
vote
that he's
behind
in.
the scenes.
Paul's saying that he's in if we buy a
Paul's in.
table. Maybe we should buy a table for the ET stand and have a table.
I think we should.
Not a bad idea. I wonder how much the tickets are. I guess we'll work that out after this podcast. Franco, lastly from you.
Yeah, mate. It's been a great year. Thanks very much for the company, both co-hosts and all of our audience. Really, really appreciate the journey we've been on. Looking forward to next year. It's going to be an exciting one. And thank you very much. I don't know if it's talking about all these great players or not, but I'm feeling hot. Could be the hat. I'm going to need a cold shower after this one.
Well, we've got some cool stuff coming, don't we, Franco? We're going to open the tipping comp up to everyone.
MVP voting.
Yep. Player of the match voting. So we're going to work out a way to do that. We're going to get the merchandise happening, the ET stand mug, and we'll get a few other things happening. So we're also going to do a launch event or a live podcast event too. And Ash is saying that we'll get together for a beer post-event and talk it through. That we will, Ash. We might even make you come along to the post-event and we can talk it through there. But boy, what a terrific amount of time. It's been great having Ash Taylor comment in. We'll have to get Ash on an episode of the ET stand, I think. Definitely have to do that.
Sounds good.
All right. I just want to say thank you to everyone for making it through the hour of power of the ET stand Sharks panel, the smuggest panel of all of the Cronulla Sharks fans podcast. Isn't that right, Franco?
Not at all.
And can I just confirm we've managed to get through a whole episode with no swearing. Now, we don't swear. The normal hosts of this podcast, we don't swear. But I can confirm it's very hard to be a Sharks podcast host and not swear sometimes. we try to get through it, don't we, Franco? Chris?
I think my record's unblemished. I can't speak for yours.
I think I've only got 2 slip through there, maybe, but that might have been a post game. So, yeah, they're the live ones. They're a little bit different.
Oh, when I dialed in. What about me dialing in live from Melbourne, Franco? Goodness. I was like,
Keep a lid on it, champ. I don't have a beep button yet.
Oh, goodness me. Well, anyway, we've had a great year. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to anyone who's associated with the Cronulla Sharks at all, and anyone who's watching us and friends of the show, anyone who writes to us, comments on it. We're just trying to be a big club of Sharks fans who sit in the ET stand. And we're just a group of mates who sit in the ET stand, who have a lot of fun doing it, chatting with each other, having fun, bringing this to you guys. So we'll be back next year better than ever. If you'd like to be involved in the show in some way, do get in contact with us. Not hard to find. And other than that, I'm just going to say Sharks 2025 Premiership. Here we go, baby. All righty. We'll see you guys next time on the ET stand. I think it'll be after Australia Day. Up, Cronulla.
For over 50 years, people have come to see the Sharks play. talent, skill, speed, intelligence, elite level athleticism. That's not these guys. Biased, one-eyed, opinionated, more often wrong than right. They make up for their complete lack of talent with pure dribble, gibberish, and enthusiasm. This is the ET Stand Podcast.